This entire process since 1901 is specifically designed to dupe you and others. Oh yeah, this is like weird eco-terrorism, I guess. I mean, this has been happening since 1948. Very odd. And it actually unironically hurts the ecosystem for Israel too. It's not like it's a very odd thing that they're doing.
Involves European pine trees, international celebrities, and if you've ever donated to this little blue box, it involves you too. The story begins in 1948 when Zionists...
There were literal chatters in here who talked about their own personal experiences with birthright, because this is like baked into Zionist propaganda in the Western world, where people who thought that they were just like planting trees in the most innocent way possible, not recognizing that they were participating in this action that was actually destroying the indigenous ecosystem.
Militias forced over 75% of the Palestinian population
Uncle
out of
Sam
their
talked
homes
about it
and
too,
off
yeah.
their land, emptying and destroying over 500 Palestinian villages. Palestinians called this event the Nakba, which is Arabic for catastrophe.
Oh, it was ham and cheddar.
Israelis mark this event as their Independence Day. Shortly after the State of Israel was created, the state seized and illegally annexed over 240,000 acres of land and property that was classified as abandoned after its Palestinian owners were forced out and barred from returning. This stolen Palestinian land was transferred to an organization by the name of the Jewish National Fund, or the JNF, an international organization with charitable status in countries like the US, Canada, and the UK. But the JNF isn't your average charity. Established in 1901, the JNF has played a key role in the colonization of Palestine, in its early days collecting money for the Zionist movement to buy up Palestinian land for European Jewish colonists, with a mandate to redeem land in Palestine for the purpose of settling Jews. Part of the way the JNF raised money to buy land in Palestine was through these blue tin boxes. By World War II, over 1 million JNF collection boxes had been distributed to Jewish communities all around the world, with each coin dropped into these blue tin boxes going towards land purchases and tree planting in Palestine. But before the Nakba, the JNF wasn't really that successful. As of May 1948, the JNF had only managed to purchase around 3.56% of the land of historic Palestine. But after the Nakba, through the forcible seizure of Palestinian land, that number rose to 13%, over 600,000 acres of land. And with all this new land at its disposal, the JNF embarked on a massive tree planting drive across occupied Palestine, claiming it was planting forests on barren, desolate land, presenting its project to the world as environmental.
Yeah, making the desert bloom is how this is presented to the Western world.
Environmentalism, building family-friendly green lungs across the country. Except these green lungs were conveniently built where Palestinian villages and towns once stood.
It's some real nefarious shit, dude. Like real nefarious shit. Oh, we're there's nothing here. These are abandoned lands. Nobody wanted them. It's like, yeah, nobody wanted them. You had to literally kill and forcibly remove the people off that land, destroy the villages, and then build on top of it.
Greenwashing Israel's wholesale destruction of Palestine.
This is why I say Zionism is fascism, okay? This is why Zionism is fascism.
Palestinian communities, with the intent of not only concealing their remains, but also using forests to confiscate more stolen Palestinian land. And the JNF's tree of choice? This European pine tree. Instead of planting indigenous trees like the olive tree, which had been on the land.
They did this for everything, by the way. They destroyed Arab villages and tried to Hebrewize the Arab villages by giving them new Hebrew names. They destroyed Arab villages and planted pine trees They killed the indigenous olive trees that take hundreds of years in certain instances to grow, and literally built fucking planted pine trees on top of it to Europeanize the area.
Land for centuries, the JNF instead opted for trees indigenous to Europe, trees that would later prove to be flammable under West Asian heat and extremely detrimental to the land. Why this tree? Well, because settlers didn't just want the land, they also wanted it to look like Europe, transforming the Levantine landscape into something European Jewish settlers would feel at home in. So one by one, Palestinian villages were emptied and destroyed, and man-made forests...
Bro, these freeways smack dab in the middle of Chicago are just to get people into our diversity where they need to go. Come on.
Nature and recreational parks filled with highly flammable European pine trees.
You're right. We've done it too. Exactly. More modern examples of like personally fucking paving on top of... I mean, Central Park. Central Park is a good example too. Central Park is a direct example of this. Yeah. Racist infrastructure is like... White supremacist infrastructure is a, foundational principle for white supremacist countries. Another settler colonial state, the United States of America.
Trees emerged in their place. Al-Lajun became Megiddo Forest. Beit Jiz turned into Rabin Park, and American Independence Park was built on the ruins of 7 Palestinian villages. Through the JNF's environmental work, over 250 million trees were planted throughout historic Palestine, covering up the remains of over 500 Palestinian destroyed villages. All thanks to tax-free donations from Jews and non-Jews around the world. With the blue collection box...
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting question. Can anyone remember another fascist, possibly, nation that took a lot of influence from American settler colonialism and its white supremacist modus operandi, whether it be Manifest Destiny or whether it be, racial segregation and eugenics? Who was... Oh, that's right. It's the Nazis. That's right. Adolf fucking Hitler. He did that shit too. That's crazy. It almost feels like fascism as a ideology is just constantly ripping other prior fascist formations.
Becoming a sentimental icon that represented a connection to the National Zionist Project, with so many people either donating or planting trees. From politicians of today like Kamala Harris.
I fondly remember those Jewish National Fund boxes that we would use to collect donations to plant trees for Israel.
To iconic celebrities like Frank Sinatra and Elizabeth Taylor, all complicit in greenwashing. But behind the photo ops and little blue boxes is the truth of what lay beneath these forests. Today, more than 2/3 of all JNF parks are built on destroyed Palestinian villages. That's 46 out of 68 national parks. The JNF...
I feel like such a fucking idiot. I grew up hearing about how us Jews care so much about planting trees in the environment. I mean, listen, you're not... It's fine. It's like, how are you supposed to fucking know? Okay? It's about learning. This entire process since 1901 is specifically designed to dupe you and others. Like, there is no reason to keep feeling bad for being duped about this in the past. Like, just move on. It is a very, very nefarious and very successful marketing campaign. I find that to be a waste of time to be like genuinely upset about who you were in the past and what you believed in the past. As long as you have recognized that it's wrong and you know the truth, then, you just move on and you spread that truth to others around you to do your very best.
Continues to operate in countries around the world using tax-free donations to not only cover up the crimes of the past, but to steal more and more Palestinian land today, in places like the Naqab Desert, where the JNF is working now with the state of Israel to use forestation or the process of planting trees to evict Palestinian Bedouins from their lands and replace.
You weren't completely thrown when you learned about the Armenian genocide when you were young? Not necessarily. It always smelled fishy. And also, the Armenian genocide is recognized. This is way more nefarious than that. The Armenian genocide is not recognized as a genocide, but still like death and destruction upon the Armenian population is recognized. It's just in the Turkish propaganda side of it, they say it was a necessary violence because the Armenians were collaborating in the villages with the Russians during World War I and like killing children and yada, yada, yada. So for that reason, it was just like, if you literally look at it, if you look at it with a little bit of skepticism, with a healthy curiosity, you can kind of parse through that propaganda. Same with pogroms against Kurdish people. Yeah, the Turks say the same about Azazas being massacred in Dersim. Yeah, you're like, okay, so there were killings, but you're saying it was justified? That feels a little weird. What's that about? You know, what's that seems odd. So it's not like this shit. This is like, you know, this is so much more holistic and so much more nefarious. It smelled fishy to you, but that's not fishy to 99.9% of Turks. I only know 2 people in Turkey that recognize it, and one of them was my history teacher, and the other is an Armenian guy. Even leftists don't recognize it. No, I know. I'm saying that. No. Plenty of people don't recognize it because they've been lied to their whole lives. But my point is, there's still death that they openly admit, right? They still say, well, it was a forced relocation of an entire population of people, right? It's just about why that happened. Turks will say that is a lie. Like the reason why it happened is because, the Armenians were killing people in the villages and collaborating with the Russians. And, the justification for it, or the number of deaths is minimized in Turkey, but then also the justification for it is like seen as valid, right? Like, oh, these are the reasons why it was a necessity. That's just the way it's taught. But it's still recognized that Armenians were killed, right? So I think that opens up the door for you to at least be a little bit more curious about it. And this is not even saying like, oh, Turkish propaganda is like more moral than Israeli propaganda or something like that. This actually means that like there should be more Turks that recognize it. To be honest, like I think that actually my own personal development on this part of history is part of the reason why I respect anti-Zionist Israeli Jews so much, because I kind of get it in a way that Americans cannot. Americans will never be able to understand like being anti-imperialist in America, because like American imperialism is imperialism overseas is like coming to the recognition of indigenous genocide after the entire population has been genocided is a little bit different, if that makes sense. Whereas like the propaganda is not so utterly baked in. People kind of recognize it in America, but they're like, yeah, it happened in the past. This sucks. That sort of shit. Whereas like being anti-Zionist, being an anti-Zionist Jew in Israel right now is akin to, in many different ways, like openly recognizing the Armenian genocide, and many other pogroms against like other ethnic minorities in Turkey, in a sea of ultranationalism running amok.
Them with Jewish settlers, all under the guise of making the desert bloom. This story, and so many others like it, is a reminder of how even the most innocent things, like trees or charities that plant trees, when used by colonial entities like Israel, are often just a cover-up for something much more sinister. This one just happens to be a cover-up that's been 76 years in the making.
Hasan learned about North American Native Indigenous History Challenge? No, this is like identical. What are you talking about? I just straight up said This is settler colonialism through and through. It is almost identical to what Americans did, the early pilgrims. What the fuck? I'm behind on mobile? The fuck do you mean you're behind on mobile? No, you're not behind by an hour. I literally said this like 30 minutes ago. I'm on mobile too, and we're still watching yesterday's broadcast. Anyway, yeah, it's just settler, colonial, genocidal operations. You know, typical shit. It's gross. It is very nefarious to just like mask another form of like ecological terrorism that will bite you in the ass inevitably, mind you, as in the non-indigenous trees that you're planting are non-indigenous for a fucking reason. It means that they're not supposed to grow there. It means that they will, again, cause massive fires, for example, massive wildfires. It will destroy the land. When you destroy the indigenous olive trees and do this thing, when you salt, you're basically salting the earth, okay? You're causing the soil to change. That is something that ends up cooking you in the long run anyway. I had a couple of trees planted in my name as a bar mitzvah present. Do you think it's worth reaching out to the org to ask them to chop them down? No, I think it's done. Yeah, they only planted the one type of tree as well, destroying all biodiversity and meaning more wildfires. Yup.